Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Red True Crime. Hopefully, everyone's staying warm and safe in their homes. I am still snowed in into mine. My street is still covered in ice, so I can't really leave my house. So, welcome, and hopefully, you tune into this. I keep you entertained for this afternoon. So, on January 30th, 2026, while headlines screamed about market crashes, a New York courtroom quietly ruled that Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the brazen 2024 assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, will not face federal death penalty charges. The judge dismissed key counts, sparing him the needle for now. But let's rewind to 2025. 47 executions nationwide, the highest record since 2009, nearly double 2024's count. Florida alone carried out a record 19 nitrogen gas masks, replaced needles in some chambers. And the federal government signaled a hard return to retribution. So, welcome back to Red True Crime, where we uncover the darkest corners of justice. I'm Rebecca, and today we trace the death penalty from colonial spectacles to 2026 evolving machine. We'll cover full history, spotlight high profile executions that shocked America, weigh arguments for and against, and compare globally and ask, does it deter killers? Now, I'm going to say this viewer discretion is advised. Really heavy topics, brutal crimes, botched executions. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. And this deep dive, it's going to run a minute. So let's begin. Welcome back, everyone. So, America's death penalty began in 1608. Captain George Kendall shot in Jamestown for suspected treason and spying. Colonial laws rooted in English common law executed for murder, rape, theft, witchcraft, blasphemy, and even denying the true God. Public hangings drew thousands, spectacles of warning and ritual. Now, the Salem witch trials in 1692, 19 hanged, Giles Corey pressed to death under stones, and by the 1790s to 1800s, reformers limited it. Pennsylvania restricted to first-degree murder in 1794, and Michigan abolished for most crimes, 1846, first state. In fact, Michigan only kept it for the crime of treason, and executions moved indoors to curb mobs. Hanging dominated, but it was often botched. So we see a peak in the 1930s, 150 to 170 yearly amid Depression crime. Total since 1608, 15,000 plus. And then with the 20th century, it sought humanity. Electric chair debuted in 1890. William Kemmler was a botched execution, flame, smoke, 8 minutes of complete horror. And it spread widely. Mid-century icon Sacco Vanzetti, 1927, electrocuted amid bias protests. Limburg baby kidnapper Bruno Hauptmann, 1936. Rosenberg's 1953, the atomic espionage and worldwide outrage. And then we saw a decline post-World War II. De facto moratorium from 1967 to 1977. But 1972, you have Furman v. Georgia. The Supreme Court justice ruled it arbitrary and cruel, 5-4, and they said they likened it to being struck by lightning and commuted 600 sentences. By 1976, Gregg v. Georgia upheld revised laws, guided discretion, bifurcated trials, and modern era began. First, Gary Gilmore in Utah in 1977, and it demanded death, chose firing squad, and with his words, "Let's do it." Then methods evolved: rope to chair to gas to injection, and it's been dominant since the 1980s. But humane needle, 2026 shows it's unraveling. Drug shortages and botches. So Ted Bundy, one of our first high profile executions in recent history, in 1989, he actually got the electric chair in Florida, confessed to 30 plus murders. Crowds cheered, fireworks outside, and his last meal was steak and eggs. John Wayne Gacy, 1994, got the lethal injection. Killer Clown, as he was known. Um, 33 victims buried under home. Final words, kiss my ass. Then we have Timothy McVeigh, who federal injection, Oklahoma City bomber, 168 dead, 19 children because there was a daycare on the first floor of that building. Watched The Last Mohicans. He had no final words, and he was the first federal case in decades. Eileen Wuornos, female serial killer, 7 men. Raise the trauma/gender questions. But then you have botches expose flaws. Alabama's John Evans, 1983, electric chair, body caught on fire. Oklahoma's Clayton Lockett, 2014, 43 minutes writhing. Arizona's Joseph Wood, 2014, 2 hours of gasping. And then you have the surge, 47 executions in Florida, 19 on record, non-unanimous, 8-4 juries helped. Methods, mostly injection, 5 nitrogen hypoxia, which is this special little gas mask here, 3 firing squad. Post 1976 total, 1,650 plus. Texas leads historically, death row shrinking amid exonerations. So we have some nice little graphs here. So we are at a 16-year high right now in 2025, going into 2026, 47 executions. And then you have the murder rates where the death happens. Sorry about that. So in the South, 7.9 on average, and the West, 7.9 on average. Um, 80% of the executions are the highest rate in the West Coast, on the west part of the country. In the Northeast, almost no death, lowest murder rate. So you got to kind of look at it like what's the murder rate in these areas versus how much they're using the death penalty. But the new method is that nitrogen gas mask. So, and then we have the 2025 stats, 39 lethal injections, 5 firing squads. It's crazy how it's all changed. And the fact that firing squad's even coming back into fashion, so to speak. Okay. So in 2026, 23 states abolished it, plus DC abolished the death penalty. 27 retain federal military too, and there's been many moratoriums. Florida's 2025 frenzy, 19 executions driven by policy shifts, no unanimous jury needed. That's the key. When it came to the death penalty, it had to be a unanimous decision in most states. But Florida's like, no, we have more people who want it. Like if it's like, it doesn't have to be unanimous. If it's like 10-2 or whatever, they're going to do it. Federal, Attorney General Pam Bondi's 2025 memos revived pursuit. Mandatory seek for LEO murders, capital crimes by undocumented immigrants. And then we get the nitrogen hypoxia case, which is the death gas mask. That became a thing in, in Alabama. Kenneth Smith struggled minutes despite painless claims. and it's been adopted more widely by 2026 for availability. And people are protesting the highlighting of the distress because it's not um, painless. And then when you look at the Almost, Richard Glossip, this guy right here, um, new trial after hidden evidence, false testimony. He had 9 prior death penalty dates, 9, and then he was spared. But innocence reality, over 200 exonerations since 1973, 1 per 8 executions. These are irreversible. These people have died, but they're being exonerated after they've been killed. Crazy, right? So, for retribution, it's eye for an eye, closure for the victims' families. Incapacitation, no reoffend, possible deterrence, I don't know. But that's for the 4. Against, no proven deterrence. 2012 National Academy studies are inconclusive. Um, the South has the highest execution rates, has the highest murder rates. Northeast, low to no death penalty, lowest of crime rates. Criminologists say 88% say ineffective versus costlier appeals. And then you have the racial bias, the arbitrariness, cruelty, botches, death row torment, distracts from prevention. Public support stays anywhere between 50 and 55%. But when we look at the world, US outlier among democracies with Japan. 110 countries abolished, 55 retain. For 2024 to 2025, 1,500 plus known executions. China's has thousands of them in secret. Iran and the Saudi high are very public on hanging and beheading. And then the U.S. low volume, private, humane focus versus harsher broad trend. I mean, abolition, but are authoritarian expansions. So, you got to look at the conclusion on this because now we're looking at, does it actually work? Does it deter anybody from doing what they're doing? Because the one argument is death penalty costs less, but there are so many appeals in place that you're having to get judges, or not judges, lawyers and all that are fighting for you, and that manpower, which is paid by the state, costs more than it would to house this person for life. I know the FBI and their behavioral analysis unit people have utilized the prisoners that have been on the death penalty or life in prison to study them and to get a better idea of the psychopathic mind to help track down serial killers and other offenders like that. That is an argument to abolish the death penalty right there. But then I look at it as, because this goes state by state, you have enough people who have done horrific crimes that get these 20-year sentences, because life in most states is 20 years. If they get parole and they've behaved themselves in prison, they get to come out. But they reoffend and go back in. And you look at the people who are the serial pedophiles and sex offenders that are destroying lives. Do they deserve to live? Because they can't be rehabbed. They go to therapy, they do all these things, but their reoffending rate is so high, they cannot be rehabilitable to go back out into public. So should they be under the death penalty persona? The parameters of that. I do have a question on that because you've got so many people that kept reoffending. And then you've got the people who do attempted murder multiple times till they eventually kill someone, then they go to jail. Then they get life. But why didn't they get put in jail before that to keep them from killing somebody? I don't know. It goes back and forth, back and forth. So, in conclusion, you go from Salem, the stones, to nitrogen mass. The death penalty reflects justice extremes, retribution versus humanity's cost. 2026 shows resurgence amid declining support, innocence risks, and failed deterrence. And I understand the innocence risk. I completely get that because you have so many people who have been put in prison for 20, 30, 40 years and, because of DNA not being in existence when they were initially put in prison are getting exonerated. And then, you've got prosecutors hiding evidence. You've got people who will give false statements to get a conclusion that they want. How does the death penalty come into play with all of that? Because if you execute someone who is truly innocent, they don't get their life back even though they get exonerated after the fact. And that's a hell of a risk to take. So, what do you think? Does it belong in modern America? Comment for or against thoughts on cases like Bundy or Glossip. And thanks for watching Red True Crime. Like, subscribe, and make sure you turn your notifications on and stay safe. But it's definitely one to think about because with all of the issues we've been having with influx of illegal occupants of this country, so many of them have been convicted of murder and whatnot in other countries. Do we get to keep them here and issue the death penalty for them? Because there have been times with Americans in other countries have committed crimes and they have been forced to stay there and face those penalties. You know, it's a good question. Canada doesn't have the death penalty and will not send somebody who has left our country and escaped to Canada, will not send them back with the death penalty on the table. These are all thoughts about all of this. And I don't think it's a black and white issue. A lot comes into play. And if there was some type of guarantee that whoever we're executing was truly guilty, I'd be all for it. And I do think other crimes should constitute being put under capital case, like rape or sexual assault of children and these type of things. Because, my opinion, these type of people are so depraved that I don't think they deserve to live. But that's my opinion. But let me know what you all think. Put your comments in here and stay safe, stay warm, and as I always say, be weird, be rude, be safe. This is Rebecca with Red True Crime. I'm out. Have a great day.